Masechet Zevaḥim Daf Yod Bet. In the Mishnah, we saw machloket between Rabbi Yoshua and Ben Betera regarding the morning of the 14th. Rabbi Yoshua says that the morning of the 14th is not a time of Pesach at all. It's in fact like the 13th, and therefore, if you would take a sheep that was designated as a Korban Pesach and you do shechita on it in the morning of the 14th, Leshem Shelamim, it would be fine. Just like on the 13th, you could bring a Pesach Leshem Shelamim, so too even on the 14th in the morning. However, Ben Betara said, no, that's no good because it's as if you did it in the afternoon. And so you see, Ben Betara is treating the morning of the 14th to some extent like the afternoon when you can bring a Korban Pesach, and therefore, if you bring a Korban Pesach in the morning, Leshem Shelamim, well, just like if you did that in the afternoon, it would be Pasul, so too in the morning, it would also be Pasul. Now, we are going to see two interpretations of Ben Betera. What would he say about if you did it lishma? The Mishnah taught a case where you bring a Korban Pesach as a shelo lishma, as anything else. Let's just say as a shelamim, to keep it simple. In fact, if you think of anything else, it'll still be a shelamim. So if you bring it in the morning, shelo lishma, that's the machloket. But the Mishnah does not say explicitly what would Ben Betera say if it was given lishma in the morning as a Korban Pesach. So we started with the first interpretation, which is that of Rabbi Oshaya. And he said that, in fact, Ben Betera treats the morning the same as the afternoon. You could bring a Korban Pesach in the morning of the 14th. That's totally fine. Okay, so we said, well, how do you interpret the word ki'ilu? And then, what about Ben ha'arbaim? That was the big question against Rabbi Oshaya. And he said, actually, Ben ha'arbaim can mean all day, from the night to the night, from sunset. So that means from sunrise to sunset. That is all that is Ben ha'arbaim. We asked about other cases, Korban Tamid, the lighting of the Nerot, Ketoret, and we said no, in all those cases, they have to be in the afternoon because of other Pisukim and the context there. But Ben ha'arbaim in this case of Korban Pesach can in fact mean all day. That's what we're up to. Now the next challenge against Rabbi Oshaya. Hatam nameketib shamtiz bachet Pesach ba'arev. Regarding Korban Pesach, it says you will sacrifice it there in the evening, and this is a language that is also used regarding the menorah. It says me'arev ad boker, and we proved from there that even though it says regarding lighting the menorah ben ha'arbaim, but it also says me'arev, and therefore it's going to have to be only near the nighttime, in the late afternoon. That's when we bring it. Well, Korban Pesach, although it says ben ha'arbaim, which you are interpreting to mean any time during the day, but it also says ba'arev. So isn't that also going to mean that it has to be at night and not in the morning? And the answer is Hahu le yeuchar davar hu da'ata. The Tanya yeuchar davar shneimar bo ba'arev u ben ha'arbaim le davar shelo neimar bo ela ben ha'arbaim bilbad. No, this arev is going to teach me that if you bring it in the afternoon, then it has to be after other items. As a Braita says, Yuchar Davar, that has to be brought after other things. Because something that says Ba'erev and Ben Harbaim, that's Korban Pesach, where it says both of these terms, that has to come after something that only says Ben Harbaim. And therefore, you're going to have to make sure to bring the Korban Tamid Shel Ben Harbaim, the afternoon Korban Tamid, has to be brought beforehand. And in fact, on Pesach, Erev Pesach, on the 14th, they would bring the Korban Tamid Shel Ben Harbaim earlier than usual so that they could have more time to bring all the Korban Pesachs. And so that's what it's teaching me. But it's not teaching me that it can't be in the morning. In fact, it could be in the morning. So Ben Arbaim teaches me that it could be any time during the day, morning or afternoon. But Erev says if you're going to do it in the afternoon, then you have to make sure that it will be the last, that it will be after things that are only said ben ha'arbaim. Umika midid ilu shachit lemisafra amat zimnehu v'chim mateh ben ha'arbaim amat yochar davar. And now we wonder about this. Is there any other precedent that for such a law that if you did it in the morning, we say, yeah, the morning's fine. You could do it in early, you could do it in the morning. That's its time. But if you do it in the afternoon, then it has to be after the korban tamid shel ben ha'arbaim. Is there such a thing? And the answer is in. De'amar bi Yochanan halacha mitpalel shemincha ve'achar kach mitpalel shemusaf. The answer is musaf. Musaf, one can pray in the morning. That's what we usually do. We say shacharit and then we say musaf, but before midday, and so it's still morning. That's fine. But if you do wait till the afternoon, because musaf you could say all day, so if you wait till the afternoon, then mincha takes precedence. It's tadir, and therefore you should say mincha first and then say musaf after. So that's a good example of something that you could do it all day, you could do it in the morning, but if you wait for the afternoon, then you have to do mincha first, and then only then musaf. So it's exactly the same thing for Korban Pesach. Good. Now we are going to refute this opinion of Rabbi Yoshaya that the phrase Ben Arbaim that is mentioned regarding Ketoret and Nerot, what does it teach me? If Ben Arbaim is supposed to mean all day, but then in other the Torah, the context of the Torah and the words there say that it's going to be only in the afternoon. So then it's obviously in the afternoon. So then Ben Arbaim are extra words. They're not needed. And so that doesn't make sense. And so you don't have an answer to that. And furthermore, another challenge against Rabbi Oshaya. Ve'od. Heshib Rabbi Tachad ben Betera ledivrei Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi responded to Rabbi Yoshua on behalf of ben Betera. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi follows Ben Betera, and he argued against Rabbi Yoshua in the following way. And he said, Lo, im amarta b'shlosha asar she'en miksato ra'ui, tomar ba'abar asar she'miksato ra'ui. Rabbi Yoshua said that the 14th in the morning is like the 13th. And therefore, if you bring a Korban Pesach as a shelamim, it's kosher. But Rabbi said, no, you cannot say regarding the 13th, where none of the day of the 13th is going to be fit for a Korban Pesach, you cannot compare that to the 14th, where part of the 14th is going to be Ra'ui. The afternoon on the 14th, it can be a Korban Pesach. So you can't say that the morning of the 14th is the same as the 13th. That doesn't make sense. Rather, you should say that the morning has some aspect of the afternoon. That was his argument, and therefore, you should not say that it's kosher in the morning. Rather, you should say that if you bring a Korban Pesach as a shelamim in the morning, it'll be Yoshua. You should agree it's not the same as the 13th, where it will be kosher. You should say, well, it's the same day as the 14th. Therefore, it's the same day as the afternoon, where it will be when it will be a Korban Pesach, and therefore in the morning also it should be not kosher. V'im ita kulo ra'ui hu. And now, if you say that the Korban Pesach, according to Ben Betera, can be brought in the morning, then actually it's not miksato ra'ui, but kulo ra'ui. You see that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who follows Ben Betera, thinks that the 14th is only part of the day is fit for Korban Pesach. The argument is that since part of the afternoon is fit for Korban Pesach, that should have an effect on the morning also. But he still only says that part of the day can be used as a Korban Pesach, and therefore the morning actually could not be. You cannot bring a Korban Pesach in the morning. And if Rabbi Oshaya was right, then he would say kulod. No, this whole day you could bring Korban Pesach, and therefore Rabbi Oshaya, you're totally wrong. He doesn't say all day is fit for Korban Pesach, and therefore Rabbi Oshaya's interpretation of Ben Betera does not fit with Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's interpretation here, and therefore we bring another opinion. Ela Amar Rabbi Yochanan, the contemporary of Rabbi Oshaya. You see, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is a Tana, so he's more authoritative. And so that refutes Rabbi Oshaya. Rabbi Yochanan says no. Posel haya ben betera bepesach sheshechato be'aba'asa shacharit ben lishmo ben shelo lishmo ho'ilu miksato ra'ui. Actually, ben betera would say, if you bring a korban, an animal, sheep, designated as korban pesach, if you bring it on the morning of the 14th, it's no good, no matter what your intention. You have a korban pesach and you do shechita on the 14th in the morning. If you had in mind that's going to be a korban pesach, no good, because Korban Pesach has to be in the afternoon. So according to Yochanan, he disagrees, and therefore you don't have to have no problem with the whole Ben Arbaim. He would say Ben Arbaim simply means in the afternoon. Regarding everything, regarding Pesach too, it has to be in the afternoon, and therefore, if you would offer it in the morning, not the right time for Korban Pesach, no good. And if you have in mind there's going to be a shelamim, also not good, because it's not like the 13th. Rather, since part of the day is fit for Korban Pesach, that's the afternoon, therefore, that's going to have an effect also on the morning. And you can't bring a Pesach as a shelamim in the morning either. So, the Korban Pesach in the morning of the 14th is going to be pasul no matter what you have in mind. That's Rabbi Yochanan's interpretation. Now, this also gets challenged. Megadef ba Rabbi Abhu. Rabbi Abhu, it's not just a challenge. Megadef is a very strong word. He ridiculed this. He says, how could that be? Im ken Pesach kasher leben betara hechi mashkachat la I de'afreshe ha'idana tachui me'ikaro hu v'i de'afreshinu me'etmol nir'eh v'nidche hu. How could you ever have a Korban Pesach according to a kosher Korban Pesach according to Ben Betera? Because you have to designate it as a Korban Pesach at some point. Now we're going to introduce the law of dichui. Dichui means something that's disqualified. And everybody would agree that, let's say you have an animal that is qualified, is good now. And then for some reason, we'll see some various reasons why it can become disqualified. Let's say it becomes disqualified at some time after. So now it's not good. You can't bring that korban. Let's say something changes again and it becomes qualified again. The rule is once it's nidche, that's it. It's nidche permanently. And that is certainly true if it was fit and then became unfit and then fit again. No, you can't bring it. Now, there's going to be a machloket about what if at the time of designation it was unfit. Let's assume right now that there's no difference, and if at the time of designation it's unfit, then it remains unfit permanently, even if something changes that at that later point it would be fit. But here, that's the general rule. There are machloket about these things, but right now we're assuming that something's unfit, it's unfit permanently. So, how can you ever designate a Korban Pesach? If you are designating it now, meaning on to 14th in the morning, then it's unfit right from the start. And that's no good, because in the morning you just said that you can't bring this sheep, not for a Korban Pesach, and not for a Shelamim, not for anything. So it's disqualified. Therefore, even in the afternoon, when now it would become fit for a Korban Pesach, no, but it was unfit for already from before, it remains unfit. Okay, so maybe if we designated the previous day, okay, fine. The previous day is true. It can be a shelamim on the 13th. However, in the morning, it becomes unfit. And that's another rule. If it was fit, but then it becomes unfit, that case is actually even worse. Even some opinions that said that dichui meikaro was okay would say that nir'eh v'nidche is no good. It was fit, it was good, and now it's no good, there's permanently no good. So then, how are you going to ever have a korban in the afternoon? Because it's going to have to go through the morning. That's a good question that Rabbi Abhu asks, but he answers, Ela amar Rabbi Abhu tehela had hasot. Oh, it could be if you designate the sheep after hasot. So you have just a regular sheep, okay, you keep it around, and then after hasot, you say, this will be a Korban Pesach. That's okay, because in the afternoon you can offer it, therefore the designation is okay. But make sure not to designate it before. Abaye amar afilu tema misafra en mechusar zeman lebo bayom. Abaye says I have a different answer. You can designate it in the morning, and you don't say that as something that is lacking the time has not yet arrived. You don't say that regarding the same day. You would say that if it was a different day, you designate something on a different day, then you say, oh, this was not the right day for this korban. It's the dachui, and therefore it's dachui permanently. You would say that on a different day. But even though the morning, it's not fit in the morning, but it's going to be fit later in the day. So we don't call that mechusar zeman, such that it will be unfit. It's just very temporarily unfit. And you could just wait. We'll just wait in the afternoon, and then it'll be okay. So even a designation in the morning is fine, even though you can't actually sacrifice it in the morning for anything. Rapapa amar afilu tema me'urta laila en mechusar zeman detaneh Rabbi Ishmael leil shemini nichnas ladir lahit aser. Rapapa says you can even designate the Korban Pesach the night before, meaning like when we do bedikat hametz, the night between the 13th and the 14th, technically the night of the 14th, even then it's okay, because even the night before is not going to be called that the time has not yet arrived, even though, well, you can't bring a korban at night, and in the morning it's not going to be good, but it's all part of the same day. So just waiting, it's the same day that it will become kosher, it will become fit. So we don't say that it's going to be nidche. And we have a proof for this from a baraita from the school of Rabbi Ishmael. When it comes to the law of maaser, so you have to designate an animal to be maaser, and then afterwards you actually bring it as a korban. And there's another law that you cannot bring any animal as a sacrifice in its first 7 days of life. It has to be at least 8 days old in order to be a korban. Not only to sacrifice it, but even to designate it. And therefore, when it comes to maaser, let's say you have an animal that's 8 days old, so I want to designate it as maaser. I'm going to count them all off, 8, 9, and then the 10th one, this is maaser. And this baraita says you can do it on the night of the 8th, meaning right after the 7th day is over. At that night, that's the night of the 8th, you can bring it into the pen to be tithed, and you can count them out. Even though it's not yet the 8th day, that's okay. So you see that although it cannot be sacrificed yet, because it's still not the 8th day, but you can designate it. So just like you can designate this, so too you can designate a Korban Pesach at night, even though it will not be yet fit till the next day in the afternoon. Rabbi apetoriki rameh. Ketiv haya shivat yamim tachet imo. Ha laila hazeh. Uchtiv miyom hashemini v'hala yeraseh. Ha laila la hazeh. And this teaching of Rabbi Ishmael follows the derasha of Rabbi Apetoriki, who says there's two pesukim that seem to contradict each other. One says that a newborn animal has to remain 7 days with its mother. That means right after the 7 days, on the next night, the night of the 8th, then it's fit. But the other pasuk says, from the 8th day and onwards, then it can be accepted. That means only from the 8th day, from sunrise on the 8th day, and the nighttime is no good. Well, this is a contradiction. What do we do with that night? Ha-kesad, laila likdusha v'yom lehar. There's no contradiction. The night of the 8th, you can consecrate it. You can say 8, 9, 10, this is going to be a maaser animal, it's consecrated, even though you can't yet offer it, and then the next day you can offer it. So you see from here that you can consecrate it even at a time when it cannot actually be offered, as long as it's within the same halachic day. And that's true for Korban Pesach also, and therefore we have a number of answers to the challenge against Rabbi Yochanan. And so Rabbi Yochanan's interpretation of Rabbi Abu is that in fact, even Rabbi Abu would agree that you cannot bring a Korban Pesach on the morning of the 14th. It has to be, you have to wait till the afternoon, but you can still consecrate it according to those opinions in the morning or even in the night before. Amar le Rabbi Zera le Rabbi Abu lema kasaba Rabbi Yochanan ba'alei hayim nidchin. Rabbi Zera asked Rabbi Abu, should we assume that according to Rabbi Yochanan, once a consecrated animal is disqualified, then it becomes permanently disqualified, even if circumstances change? Amar le in de Amar Rabbi Yochanan behema shel shnei shutafin hikdish chatzia vechazar velakach chatzia v'ikdisha kedosha ve'ena kereba ve'osa temura utmurata kayose ba. Rabbi Abu responded, yes, indeed, Rabbi Yochanan does think that, because Rabbi Yochanan ruled that, let's say you have an animal that's owned by two people in partnership, and one of the partners makes it consecrated. Well, at that point, it's half consecrated, but that means that it cannot actually be sacrificed, because you can't sacrifice half of an animal. So if you consecrate an animal that cannot actually be sacrificed, well, then that will be that it's kedushat damim. Its monetary value is holy, so you can sell it and then use the money to buy an actual kosher sacrifice. Now, even if he went and bought the other half from the other partner and made that consecrated, so now he owns the whole thing and he consecrated the whole thing, still, although it is holy, it cannot be sacrificed. Why? Because when he sanctified the first half, it was unfit. And here's the rule. Once it's unfit forever, even after he acquires the other half and sanctifies it. Furthermore, if he tries to switch it, using a timurah, so the holiness of here will go on to some this other animal. Then the other animal will also be sanctified, and it will have the same status because he's doing a copy and paste. And a copy and paste, well, he's trying to do to remove the first one and put it only on the second one. In the end, the first one remains holy and unfit, and the second one also will be holy and unfit. The proper way to do it is to redeem it for money, and then the first one will not be holy, and then you buy another animal. That's Rabbi Yochanan's ruling. Ushma mina telat. We can infer three things from this ruling. Shema mina bale hayim nitchin. Number one, live animals. Not only if it's already did shechita, but even live animals. Once it's unfit forever. Ushma mina dichui mekara haba dichui. And furthermore, that even if it was unfit right from the start, that's also considered unfit, because there is another opinion that says only if it's first fit and then becomes unfit, then it's disqualified forever. But if it was unfit at first, then just wait till it's fit and then it'll be okay. But Rabbi Yochanan does not agree with that, because here the animal was never fit. It starts off being unfit because it's only half sanctified, and that remains forever. Ushma amina yesh dichui b'damim. And furthermore, even though this kedusha, the consecration of this animal, was only for its monetary value because it was never fit to be used as a sacrifice, nevertheless, that also is considered unfit and is unfit forever, even afterwards when he then owns the whole thing. And then theoretically, if he just started off at that point, he could have made it fit for a sacrifice. But because it started off unfit, even though it was only monetarily consecrated, still that's considered unfit for good. Amar Ula Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Achal chelev iftish korban v'nishtamed chazar bo ho'il v'nidche yidache. More cases about dichui. Ula says, name of Rabbi Yochanan. Let's say someone ate chelev by mistake, and he designated a korban. So that's all that so far so good. He didn't yet bring the korban, he only designated it. And then he became an apostate. He rejected all the laws of the Torah. At that point, he cannot bring a korban. Apostate is not allowed, because you can only bring a korban if you would, when you realize you would make teshuvah. But an apostate, even if he eats it by mistake, and then he realizes, I ate cheleb, he said, I don't really care. I would eat cheleb on purpose anyway. So therefore, he cannot bring a korban. So that korban becomes nidche, unfit. Even if he makes teshuvah later on, that animal, since it was considered disqualified, it's permanently disqualified. Itamar Nameh, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amar Rabbi Abu, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Another statement in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Achal chelev v'iftish korban v'nishtata, v'chazar v'nishtapa, ho'il v'nidche yidache. If someone ate chelev by mistake, and then they realized, and they designated a korban, and then they became mentally incompetent, they became a shoteh, and then they got better. But at the point when they were a shoteh, they cannot bring a korban. The shoteh cannot bring a korban. And therefore, even though he got better, since while he was a shoteh, the korban was disqualified, it remains disqualified. Now, why do we need both of these statements of Rabbi Yochanan? Can't we learn one from the other? They're basically the same principle. Userichi, diashminan kamaita. Mishum dehu dachen nafshe beyadayim. If I had only the first one, where he became an apostate, there he's actively doing it by his own free will. And so maybe I would say that in that case, it's permanently disqualified, because he acted with his own free will to become disqualified. But in the second case, where it just happened to him, he got some mental disease, and made him a shoteh. So I would say, since it was passive, that's kind of like someone who's asleep. Let's say I designate an animal, and then I fall asleep. Okay, while I'm asleep, I'm mentally incapacitated. I'm not thinking properly. But that's only a temporary thing that happened to me, and then I'll wake up. And so that I might think that this is the same thing, because it's passive, that it's not considered a permanent disqualification. And that's why I need the second case to say, Even the case of shoteh, although it just happened to him passively, still that's considered a disqualification and is permanent. Ve'i ashme'inan hacha. And if I only had the second case, mishum den bi'ado lahazor, there in the second case, it's not up to him to get better. I mean, a person gets a disease, hopefully they get better, maybe they will, maybe they won't, maybe they won't. It's up to nature, it's up to his body. And so he cannot control that. So I would say, since he cannot control it, therefore we say it's permanently, once it's disqualified, it's permanently disqualified because there's it's not in our control. But in the case of someone who became an apostate, because it's in his power, he has free will, he can make teshuvah at any time. So I would say, in that case, that we're not going to consider that disqualification to be permanent. It's in his power to go and change it. And therefore, we need the first case too to teach me not so. That once one is disqualified, whether it's because of free will or it happens passively, and whether he can come back by his free will or he has to wait till the disease hopefully gets better, doesn't matter. Once he's disqualified, he becomes permanently disqualified, and that korban cannot be used. Ba'aya Rabbi Yirmiyah, achal chelev v'efrish korban, v'aru betin shechelev mutar, v'chazru behen mahu, mi haveh dichui, or la haveh dichui. Rabbi Yirmiyah asks a question now. Interesting question. Someone ate chelev, and then by mistake, and then he realized, and he designated a korban. And then the Sanhedrin made a decision that cheleb is permitted, a mistaken decision. Now, even though it's a mistaken decision, at that point that they made that decision, people don't know better. They would follow it, and they would say, "Oh, cheleb is okay." So therefore, this guy who ate cheleb, his korban is disqualified because you don't have to bring korban. What's he going to do? He's going to show up to the Beit HaMikdash with this korban. Oh, what's this korban for? Oh, I designate this korban. I have to bring it because I ate cheleb. They'll tell them, "Oh no, the Sanhedrin, didn't you hear? They said cheleb is permitted. You don't have to bring the korban." So you see that this korban became disqualified. Now, later on, the Bet Din realizes they made a mistake. Oh, terrible. We said cheleb mutad. Actually, it's prohibited. Now, what do we say? Since the korban was disqualified once, it's disqualified forever? Or do we say, no, this was not in his hands. I mean, he remained the same. And the Sanhedrin, they went this way, then they went that way. Do we say that is not disqualified and he can still bring this korban? And an elder said, when Rabbi Yochanan started teaching about the laws of Dichui, he actually introduced the whole topic with this very question. In fact, not only is this the hardest question, this is actually the easiest case. Because in the other cases we saw before, it's actually the person who became disqualified. The person became an apostate or he became a shoteh. So that's why he cannot bring a korban. But actually the korban itself remains the way it is. And so that's a bigger chidush to say that we call that a permanent disqualification, even though it only affected the person directly and the animal only indirectly, just because the person can't bring it. But in this case, when the Bet Din says that eating cheleb is permitted, and therefore there will be no such thing as anyone in the whole world having to bring a korban hatat for eating cheleb. And so it's not that the person became disqualified, the animal itself became disqualified. So there's more reason actually to say in this case that the animal is permanently disqualified. So Rabbi Yirmiyah asked a good question, but it turns out that actually that was an easy one to answer. We move on to the second part of the Mishnah. Amar Shimon ben Azai mekubelani mepi shivim ushnaim zaken. Let's review that part of the Mishnah where he said, I have a received tradition from 72 elders from that day when Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was appointed to be Rosh Hashiva, that regarding all korbanot that are eaten, all korbanot are eaten except for korban olah. So he's saying all korbanot except for korban olah, if you slaughter it shelo lishma, it's okay, but it does not fulfill its owner's obligation except for Pesach and Chatat. So this is very similar to Tanakama all the way back in the first Mishnah. However, there is one difference. Ben Azai, that's the same person, Shimon ben Azai, is adding an olah. That olah also has this stringency. If you do shechita on an olah, l'shem, something else, then it will be pasul. However, the other sages did not agree. The other sages agree regarding Pesach and Hatat. But in olah, only Ben Azai adds this stringency. Okay, let's analyze. First of all, למה לי למתנה 72 זקן? תקולהו בחדה שיטתה, הבו קיימה. What is this language? 72, why is it zaken in singular? Shouldn't it be 72 zekenim? And the answer is, it uses the singular because they all were in total agreement. It was unanimous regarding this halacha. So that's why it says 72, but they were as one. Lo asif ben azai ela ha'olah. So Ben Azai said, also the korban olah, if it's slaughtered shelo leshem olah, it is pasul. Amar Rav Huna, my tamad Ben Azai. Rav Huna asks, what's his source? Olah hu ishe reach nechawach la Hashem. He lishma keshera shelo lishma pesula. Because the pasuk says, in olah is a burnt offering to Hashem. So it says olah hu. It has to be slaughtered for the sake of an olah. Then it's kosher. But if you slaughter it for the sake of something else, it's no good. So from this word hu, limiting word. Asham name ketibahu. Hold on. Asham also says the word hu, and yet an asham that's slaughtered not for its sake is still kosher. Hahu le'achar haktarat emurim hu dichtib. No, and over there regarding asham, the word hu is written after you burn the sacrificial portions, and at that point it doesn't matter. That all that is optional. You have to do it, but it's not required for the korban to be kosher. And so it has to be, the word hu has to be within the beginning when it's talking about the shechita. Like for korban chatat, it says the word hu, but it said for the shechita. So then I know, korban chatat has to be lishma, otherwise it's no good. But here it says the word hu for something that is not required, and therefore you cannot learn this limitation for asham. Yeah, but that's also true for korban olah. This pasuk here, Vayikra 113, is stated at the end of the process for something that is not required, for the haktara, for putting the burnt portions on the altar. So it's the same thing as asham. Today, hu ketibe. Now regarding korban olah, it says the word hu in two places. One in Vayikra 113 and another one in Shemot 29:18. Now both of those are written regarding the after it says that you put them on the altar. So either one by itself would not be sufficient, but since you have two, so one is redundant. That's coming to teach this extra law that for korban olah, if you did even the shechita, shelo lishma, it's pasul. We go back. Agabe asham name terehu kitibe. For asham also there are two pesukim. Here it is, Vayikra 5:9, Vayikra 7:5. So then you can learn the same thing for asham. Ela ben azai bekavacho omer maitila. So we abandon that line of thinking that Ben Azai is basing himself on the word hu, because although he's including olah, he's not including asham. So we need something that will show a distinction. Rather, he learned it from Makal Vachomer. Ma chatat she'ena kalil, shechata shelo lishma pesula, olah shehi kalil, lo kol sheken. If regarding a korban chatat, which is not entirely burned, and yet it has this stringency that if you do shechita, shelo lishma is no good. Olah, which is more stringent because you burn the whole thing. All the more so, korban olah will have this stringent law that it has to be lishma, and otherwise it's pasul. But we reject that. Malach chatat sheken mechaperet. But chatat has a stringency in that it gives atonement. Olah doesn't give atonement. So maybe that's why it has this special law, because it gives atonement. Pesach yochiach. Well, Pesach will prove that fact that it gives atonement is not so important. That's not the key factor, because Pesach does not give atonement, and yet korban Pesach, if you do it shelo lishmo, is pasul. Mal Pesach sheken zemano kabua. But Pesach has another stringency in that it's only at one fixed time, only on the 14th. Whereas other korbanot can be given and lots of days of the year. So maybe that's why korban Pesach has the stringency that has to be lishma. Chatat tochiach, but chatat can prove that that's not a significant ingredient, because chatat can be offered anytime, not only on that day, and yet it has the stringency. If you do shelo lishmo, it's no good. Vechazad hadin. So let's go back. We keep going around and around, but then we say lo re'izeh k're'izeh, velo re'izeh k're'izeh asad hashaveh shebahen. Shehen kodashim ushchatan shelo lishman pasul. Afani abi olah shi kodashim ushchata shelo lishma pasul. The the key factor of this one is not the same as the other one, and the stringency that you pointed on that one is not the same as this one. What is the common denominator between Pesach and Chatat? That they are holy sacrifices, and if you do shechita not for its sake, it's pasul. So too, olah, that's a sacrifice, and therefore I could learn the same thing, that if you do shechita not lishma, pasul. But we can reject that. But Pesach and Chatat have a relationship to karet. Korban Pesach, if one does not bring Korban Pesach, then one does get karet. This is one of two misvot aseh, that if you don't do it, you get karet. Pesach and Brit Milah. And Korban Chatat is brought for something that if you did it on purpose, you would get karet. So these are both related to karet. But in olah, if you're supposed to bring an olah and you don't bring an olah, you don't get karet. You don't bring an olah because of something that was karet. So therefore, korban olah cannot be compared to those two together. Ben Azai sad karet la parich. Ben Azai says, I don't agree with this refutation. You're bringing it from karet, but the relationship to karet of Korban Pesach is not the same as the relationship of karet to Korban Chatat. One is if you don't bring it, Pesach, then you get karet. Yeah, but if you don't bring a Korban Chatat, you don't get karet. And Korban Chatat is because you did a sin that you would be liable karet. But Pesach is not because of that. So you can't bring karet as a refutation. Asham name laiteh. So now we say, well, if you're going to put these two together, so a korban that's holy, these two are korbanot that are holy, therefore any korban that's holy also will have the same law. If you do shalol lishmas, no good. Well, then you could bring in asham, would be the same thing. And you would prove that asham, if you sacrifice a shalol lishma, would not be good. Asham parich malasada sheben sheken yeshnan besibur kebiyachid. No, but asham, we would reject that kal v'chomer because the common denominator between the others, Korban Pesach and Korban Chatat and Korban Olah also, it has an example where you can bring it as a communal offering or an individual offering. However, Korban Asham is only an individual offering, is never brought as a communal offering. And therefore, you cannot apply that Kal V'chomer to an Asham, although you could apply it to a Korban Olah. That is one good answer. Now, Korban Pesach technically is actually a Korban Yachid. So what do they mean here when they say, the common denominator between Chatat and Pesach is that they can be Yachid and Sibur? How could you say that even though Korban Pesach is actually a Korban Yachid? And the answer is that the Korban Pesach has some aspects of a communal offering. For example, if everybody is Tameh on Nisan, if a few people are Tameh, they have to wait till Pesach Sheni. But if the entire nation is Tameh, then they can all bring Korban Pesach betum'ah. And so that's one sense in which the Korban Pesach has a communal aspect, which is actually quite interesting because that could be relevant to today. Or why we can't bring a Korban because everybody's Tameh. Yeah, actually, if everybody's Tameh, you actually could bring a Korban. So that's an interesting law. V'iba'et ema, sad karet name parich, uben azai gemara gemir la, v'ad kamarav huna kal v'chomer lo amara ela lechaded ba talmidav. Or another answer, we can go back here and say, in fact, this refutation that Pesach and Chatat have a relationship to karet and olah doesn't, is in fact a good refutation. And so therefore Ben Azai's derivation was not from the word hu. It was not from a kal v'chomer, but rather he learned it from a tradition. He had a tradition, and so he learned it. And this was affirmed by those 72 elders on that day. So he learned it from an oral tradition. And when Rav Huna said, it's based on a kal v'chomer, the kal v'chomer was not actually the derivation of the law. Rather, he only said it in order to sharpen his students, to say, hey, what do you think about this kal v'chomer? And challenge them. And they'd have to come up with refutation. And then they go back and refute that refutation. And so all this was to train students how to think. You have to have a lot of ability to do this. First of all, you have to know all the details of each of the sacrifices. This is a good drill just to memorize. Oh yeah, this one is eaten. This one's not eaten. This one is in the north. This one is communal. So you have to know all the details. So it helps a lot when you're processing those details to memorize them. And it also helps thinking skills, reasoning skills, so that in the future you have to argue this way, argue that way. When you have all the arguments in front of you and you can zero in on them very quickly, then you can be a much clearer thinker, a better judge, a better interpreter. And so you see that this was essential to the educational system of the sages. I think this phrase, Lechaded Batamidav, is a key phrase for understanding, first of all, the whole Shas, but in particular, this Masechet, where we see, number one, it's all theoretical for the rabbis at that point, because they're not bringing korbanot, and yet they're spending so much time on it. And we saw that here, more than in most other places, the number of kal vachomes and reasonings that we're bringing, and you see here that these kal vachomes are not actually, many of them are not actually the derivation of the law. The law we know from a tradition or from pasuk or what they actually did in the Bet HaMikdash, if they have a memory of how they did it. And the kal vachomes and a lot of the discussion that we have here is for educational purpose to sharpen the minds of the students, and so we can benefit from that also. Although we are not doing korbanot, we can benefit from having our minds sharpened as well. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.